All right. Good morning, everybody. In previous class, we looked into the basics about the what is the internet, and continuing with that, what is a today we'll look into internet protocol. We'll see what is protocol. When we say about a protocol is the you can say set of rules on the basis of which the communication will be performed. So that is called as a protocol. What is a protocol? The internet exists today because of a suite of interrelated communication protocols. And a protocol is a set of rules that partners in communication use when they communicate. So when different systems are communicating over the internet, we must have a common protocol which can be used by all the various systems in order to do the proper communication. That is why we need a protocol. Layered architecture, we have the TCP IP internet protocol, where originally abstracted as a 4-layer stack. So now, even though we have seven, this initially it started as a 4-layer stack. Later abstraction subdivided further into 5 or 7 layers, but initially it started with a 4-layer stack. Since we are focused on the top layer anyhow, we will use the earliest and the simplest 4-layer network model. Whenever we are talking with any application, we are talking to the top layer. These are the 4 different layers. Top layer is the application layer, transportation layer, internet layer, and the bottommost layer is the link layer. And application layer, this is like higher protocols that allow applicants to interact with the transport layer. So whichever is the applications, this layer will allow them to interact with the transport layer. And transport layer, it ensures transmission arrive in order and without any kind of a error. So that is the job of a transportation layer. Then internet layer, it establishes connection, routing, and it will do the addressing. And link layer is the one which is the responsible for the physical transmission of the data. First one is the link layer. This is the lowest layer possible for both the physical transmission across media wires, or it can be wireless, and establishing a logical link. So link layer is the one which is like which is responsible the physical transmission of the all the bits, that is the raw data. It handles issues like packet creation, transmission, reception, error detection, collision, line sharing, and more. So it will handle all these things. I told the how the information is passed. It is passed as a whatever the message, it is divided into packets, and packets are transmitted, and they are routed in different routers in the network, and they will reach the receiver by following any kind of a routing through that particular network. So link layer will handle the issues like creating the packet, transmission, reception, also any kind of a error if there is detecting the errors. The internet layer, sometimes also called as a IP layer, routes the packets between communication partners across the network. Then internet protocol. The internet uses the IP, internet protocol addresses, to identify the destinations on the internet. So this uses the addresses to identify what is the destination of that particular packet. So that is how it will be able to send those particular packets to those addresses. every device is connected to an internet has an IP address. So IP address, as we saw in the previous class, every resource that is in the network will be having a unique number. Okay, either the IPv4 or IPv6. So whichever the address scheme it has, every device in the every resource in the internet must have a unique number, that is IP address. So that is how it will be identified in the network. IP address, which is numeric code that is meant to uniquely identify it. So this is the IP addresses and the internet. You can see every device here. So we have a workstation here. It has got a unique IP. This one is the laptop. This is a server, router, mobile device, printer. All these devices have a unique internet IP address. IPv4 addresses are the IP addresses from the original TCP/IP protocol. In IPv4, we have 12 numbers are used. Okay, and it is implemented as 4 8-bit integers. So we will be having 4 8-bit integers, and the total numbers are 12. And they are written with a dot between each of the integers. And since the unsigned 8-bit integers maximum value is 255, so you know how we get the 255. So we have total of 8 bits, and unsigned means we are not going to use any bit for the sign, so all the bits can be used for the data. So the maximum number with the 8-bit we can have is a 255. 4 integers together can encode approximately 4.2 billion unique IP addresses. So if we use IPv4, then we can identify 4.2 billion unique IP addresses, means unique devices we can have using the IPv4. So 4.2 billion, with the rate of increase in the internet and the devices and the applications, 4.2 billion seems to be a smaller number, or we might run out of all the unique addresses in near future. That is why to uniquely identify more devices, IPv6 has been used. To future-proof the internet against 4.2 billion limit, a new version of the IP protocol was created, that is IPv6. That is the new protocol. Here, the newer version uses the 8 16-bit integers. So we are going to have 8 16-bit integers. So 8 into 16. So that would be 128. So how many unique devices or addresses we can generate? 2 raised to 128. So this is a very big number, 2 raised to 18. So this would be approximately say billion times the number of IPv4. So it would be much larger number compared to 4.2 billion. So this will resolve this particular limitation that IPv4 has. These 16-bit integers are normally written in hexadecimal due to their longer length. So whenever we have a 16-bit, it is represented as a hexadecimal. So here is the examples of what we talked about. So you can see here, IPv4, we told it is 12 numbers, right? So IPv4, 12 numbers implemented as 4 8-bit integers. So you will see how many numbers we have. We have 4 numbers, okay, sorry, 12 numbers. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. There are 12 numbers, and each is implemented with 4-bit components. So this is a 4 1 1 2 4 3 4 4 numbers separated by dot, and each of this is a 8-bit. So we can have maximum number of 2 as a number from 0 to 255. So this is a one unique address. So 192.168.123.254. This is how we can have the IPv4 addresses. So how much unique addresses we can have? 2 raised to 32. Now IPv6, in case of a IPv6, it uses 8 16-bit integers. 8. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 separated by semicolon, and each of this is a 16-bit components. So that is how total, how many addresses we can, unique addresses we can have? 2 raised to 128, which is billion times what we can have using the IPv4. IP address, your IP address will generally be assigned to you by your ISP, Internet Service Provider. That is how you get the IP addresses. And in organization, whether it's a large or small, purchasing extra IP addresses from the ISP, Internet Service Provider, is not cost effective. In local network, computers can share a single IP address between them. So you can get the IP addresses from the internet service provider, and in case of a smaller local network, you can share the single IP across the different systems. Transport layer. So in the transport layer, it makes sure that, it ensures transmissions arrive in order and without any kind of a error. This is accomplished through few mechanisms. First, the data is broken into packets, formatting according to the TCP protocol, that is transmission control protocol. For what is the first step that is done? So transportation layer, so it makes sure that the transmissions arrives in an order. First thing, whatever the packets are sent, we have to have that particular order in order to make the complete information, and we have to make sure that it comes without any kind of a error. What is the first step that happens? First, the complete data, it is broken into small packets, okay, and what is the format that is followed? According to the TCP protocol, transmission control protocol. Once the data is broken into packets, each packet is acknowledged back to the sender. So the event of a lost packet, the transmitter will realize packet has been lost since no ACK arrived for that packet. So what will happen? The packet, once the packet is sent, this whoever receives that will send the acknowledgement. ACK is what? Acknowledgement to the sender. So sender will come to know that packet has been received any without any problem. If the packet is not received by the sender, acknowledgement will not be sent, then the sender will realize that the packet is lost, so it can retransmit. The packet is retransmitted, and although out of order, is reordered at the destination. Suppose if in between packet is lost, okay, and let us say we did not receive the acknowledgement for that, the sender will resend it. So when they resend, the that particular packet will not be in the order, but at transmission layer it will know how to reorder that particular packet. So this is the example. You can see, first thing is we have a message here. Okay, this is the message which is divided into 3 lines. So some kind of a message is there. The map of O, that thus dost talk in science. So some kind of a information is there. So it is broken into a packet. Message is broken into packets with a sequence number. So this complete information is broken into 3 packets with the number 1, 2, and 3. Now this is the sender. So you can see the packet, the first packet is sent, and for each packet acknowledgement must be received. So you can see the packet 1 is sent, okay, the receiver will send back the ACK. ACK is acknowledgement. ACK 1 means the first packet has been received. Similarly, second package has been sent, but there is no ACK, and third packet has been sent, and it receiver sends the acknowledgement to the sender. So The sender has received the ACK for packet 1 and packet 3. He hasn't received the ACK for the second packet. So what the sender will do, he will resend the second packet, and then it will sender will get the acknowledgement back. So now the sender is assured of transmitting all the packets. So now the communication is complete. Application layer. Okay, with the application layer, we are the level of the protocols familiar to most web developers. So application layer is the protocol which will directly we interact, okay, as a web developer. Application layer protocol implements process-to-process communication and are at a higher level of abstraction in comparison to low-level packet and IP addresses protocols in the layers below it. So application layer is the highest layer where the web developers interact. We have HTTP, so it should be HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, SSH, Secure Shell, FTP File Transfer Protocol, DNS, POP, and SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. These are the different examples of the application layer. Next, we will see the client server model. So, client server model, you can imagine before we get into the client server model, the simple example is you can think about a restaurant. Okay, in a restaurant, you are you go as a guest. So you are a user. You are sitting at a table and you want to order some food. Then a person comes to you. I will not take a name of the people because it will confuse you. So you are sitting at a restaurant table and you are the user, okay, and user of the system. You can just think user of the system, and you want to order some food, and that food should be served on your table. So you will call a person, okay, that person you can think of a browser, okay, that person is a browser, and you place your request, which is similar to you are selecting some information on the browser. Just think that on the browser you have menu and you are selecting few items there. So you will tell that particular person you need certain dishes, okay, he will note it down and he will go to the kitchen. Okay, kitchen is, you can think as a server. Okay, in case of a web application, your browser is taking your request, and once you put the request, it will on the browser you will click on the submit button. Your request is sent to the web server. Okay, the way the person is taking your order, and he is going to the kitchen and he is telling you need these kind of dishes, and he will make sure that those dishes are prepared in the kitchen. So kitchen is a server will process your request. Once your request whatever your requested is ready, the kitchen will give as a response. What is the response? The response is your food, whatever you have ordered, that is the food. So the person whom you ordered, he will bring back that food to your table and he will give it as a response. So he will serve. So this is how the client server architecture. So in terms of web application, you have a client. You are a user of the web application. You have a client. What is a client? The client is a browser where you have the web application, and you request certain thing on the web application. For example, Google. You open the Google page, you want to search something, okay, you put that type those words and you click on search. When you say click on search, you are saying you want these items to be checked on the over the internet, and all the links should be provided, and you click on search. That request is sent to the Google server. Google server will take your text and it will make all the search, whatever the algorithm it has, it will run those algorithm. It will give the response when it has all the links are ready. It will response will be given from the server to the browser as a it would be an HTML page. That particular HTML page will be displayed on your browser. So that is a basically client server architecture. So we will have many clients. So hundreds of people, they are searching on the Google. All those form as a client, and those requests are going to the server, Google server. Maybe it is a stack of servers or whatever the way they have implemented, but it's a basically server which will take your request and it will give a response. Okay, if it has links, it will give the links, it will say. Otherwise, if it is not able to find, it will say it is not able to find. Whatever the response, the server will give the response to the client. The web sometimes is referred to as a client-server model of communication. In the client-server model, there are two types of actors, clients and the servers. The server is a computer agent that is normally active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, simply 24 into 7, listening for the queries from the any client who make a request. So think of a Google. Google is available all the time. So the server is running 24 into 7. Client is a computer agent. Okay, here to be very specific, it is a your browser that makes a request and receives a response from the server in the form response codes, images, text files and other data. So whatever information you have requested, the response will come as a code or an image or a text file or any other kind of a information. So whatever you request, that is what the server will provide you. Request response loop. Within the client server model, the request response loop is the most basic mechanism on the server for receiving request and transmitting data in response. The client initiates a request. So who makes the request? Client. So client will make a request, and that request is made to the server, and from the server it gets a response that could include resources like an HTML file, an image or some other data. So response is dependent on what kind of a request you have. The peer-to-peer alternative. In the peer-to-peer model, where each computer is functionally identical, each node is able to send and receive directly with one another. In such model, each peer acts as both client and server, able to upload, download information. So in this particular, what we saw was uh, a client server model. This is a client server model. Next is a peer-to-peer model. In peer-to-peer model, each peer is a client as well as it's a server. Means either it can send a request or it can act as a server. If somebody sends a request, it will send a response. So that is called as a peer-to-peer model. Basically, you can think of in peer-to-peer model, everything is works as a server. So it can request other peer, or if other peer request, it will process that request and it will send a response. It can do both. It can send a request, or it can process the request and send the response. This is the peer-to-peer model. So where each of these peer, they can either send a request, or they can process the request and send the response. Server types. Earlier, the server was shown as a single machine, which is fine from the conceptual standpoint. Client may request for resources from URLs to the client. The server is a single machine. So traditionally thinking, we think server is a one machine. Okay, conceptually, right, based on the kind of architecture we have, kind of the load we have, we can have a stacks of servers. Okay, and using load balancer, it will balance the load, and URL is unique resource locator. That is the thing that will identify the server. However, the most real world websites are typically not served from a single server machine. So in reality, whichever the bigger applications, web applications that are running will not be served by the single server. It would be very difficult, but they are served from the many servers. It is common to split the functionality of a website between several different types of servers. Okay, we have several different types of servers based on the what type of work it will do. Okay, it can be segregated into different types. So you can see client request is coming here and it is getting routed to other servers. For example, this is a web server. It will process anything web related. Here we have the email server which will take care of sending emails. Then we have media server, authentication server. Whenever user trying to log in, this will take care of all the authentications, this particular server. Then we have application server. Suppose any application side processing has to be done, it is taken by the application server. Then we have the data server. Suppose you want to store some kind of a files or a data or database, we have a separate server for that. That is a data server. Okay. So real world server installation, not only are there different types of server, there is a often replication of each of the different server types. A busy site can receive thousands or even tens of thousands of requests a second. Globally popular sites such as Facebook receive millions of requests a second. Okay, so many websites are there or many web applications are there. They receive like millions of requests. Uh, and in spite of having different types, there can be a replication of those servers as well in order to serve those kind of millions of requests. Server farms, a single web server that is also acting as an application or a data server will be hard pressed to handle more than few hundred requests a second. So that usual strategies for busier sites is to use the server farm. Now we can have either application server or the data server. Even though we have a data server separate, application server separate, they might get lots of requests. So it would be very difficult to handle the request by the database server or the application server. In that case, the solution would be to have the server farm. You can see what is a server farm is. Instead of having just one web server, in earlier architecture you saw there is only web server, but this particular web server might be getting lots of requests. So in that case it is very difficult to handle those many requests on time, because performance is very important thing. If it is the performance is not good, because whenever user is requesting something, it has the response time should be very less. So instead of having one web browser, we can choose to have a server farm. In this we will have, you can see request is coming, we will have a load balancer and 3 web servers are connected to the load balancer. What is the job of the load balancer is, the load balancer will see which server is having less load. Means whichever server is having less load, it will route that particular request to that particular web server. Suppose this web server and this web server, they are loaded to let us say 80%, and this is loaded to only 50%. Whatever the request that will come in, that will be routed to this web server, and from this web server there might be multiple requests to the databases. So if there are, again, if there are many requests that are coming from these web servers to the data server, then we can have a additional load balancer here, and we can have 2 database server instead of 1. So again, the job of this load balancer is exactly same. It will take this request and it will check which is less loaded, and it will route that particular request to the particular server. server farms, the goal behind server farms is to distribute incoming requests between cluster of machines so that any given web or a data server is not excessively overloaded. So using the load balancer, we make sure that whichever is less loaded, the request is routed to that particular server. Special routers called load balancer distribute incoming requests to available machines. Even if a site can handle its load, uh, even if a site can handle its load via single server, it is not uncommon to still use server farm because it provides failover redundancy. Okay, one advantage of having server farm is you can balance the load, right? Suppose you are getting lot of requests, so instead of having one web server, we have here three, so it can easily respond to those requests. Let us say out of this web server, if you had only one web server and for some reason it fails, okay, there is some hardware issue or software issue or some issue with that particular server, then your whole application is down. But in case if you have two or more than two servers, even if one server fails, all the requests can be taken on the web servers. So for the user, the application will be running without any issues, even though it might run little slower because instead of two there is only one server, but they will be getting response. So complete loss of the functionality of the application will not happen. So that is called as a failover redundancy. So in case of a failure, the other servers on that farm can take care of the request. That is, if the hardware fails in a single server, one of the replicated servers in the farm will maintain the site's availability. So your web application will be running without any issues. The user will see the application running. Suppose, let us say we are using the Google. Even though Google might be using like hundreds of servers on their side, let us say one or two server has failed, we will not see that. Okay, Google will be available for us. That web application will be available for us because whichever is the redundant server, means more than one server is requesting, those servers will take over the whatever the request that will come. Server racks. In server farm, the computers do not look like the ones in your house. Instead, these computers more like the plates stacked in your kitchen cabinets. That is, a farm will have its servers and hard drive stacked on top of each other in a server racks. A typical server farm will consist of many server racks, each containing the many servers. So you can just think about, these are not the individual systems, they will be on the racks. So you can think it is a stack of the plate. So each plate is a like a server and they will be stacked on a rack. So this is a server rack. You can see these are, we have different systems here. They are stacked in a rack. Okay, these are the different units that are available on the stack. Data centers, server farms are typically housed in a special facilities called as a data centers. So the data centers will be having these server farms, okay, and there will be many racks, okay, serving different clients. Okay, so data centers will be filled with these kinds of racks, and data centers is the one where all the servers will be stored, and these data centers will be located in such a place where suppose if your organization is physically operating in, let us say, Bangalore, they might be having their servers. That particular organization might be having data center, their servers on the data center which is located in Bangalore, and also they might have the servers that are located in physically some other location, let us say in New York or some other place in London, so that they will have a in case of a failures, the other data centers, the other servers in the other data centers can take care. Also, this is also helpful if there is any disaster at one physical location. If we lose the servers on one physical location, we will be having the servers which are running on different locations. So this is the general look of a data center. So you can see these are the server racks. Okay, and everything will be all these racks will be under air condition so that no server heats up. Then we have the backup generators, UPS batteries, so that if there is no interruption to these servers, so these servers will be running 24 into 7. So whether there is an active power supply or not, if it is not, there will be UPS, or if otherwise there is another backup which will be working as a generators which can provide the power to all these servers. Data center. To prevent the potential for site downtimes, most large websites will exist in mirrored data centers in different parts of the country or even world. Okay, as I give the example for, let us say, Google is globally used, right, by all the countries. So they might have their data center, one located in Asia region, one located in the Europe region, one located in the Americas region. So it is dependent on the organization how they want to have the data centers. So they can have different they can have data centers in different parts of the country or even the world. As a consequence, the costs for multiple redundant data centers are quite high. So one problem with that is the cost will increase because you are going to have multiple data centers. Also, there is an advantage, as I told you, if you lose the servers at one location, the other two locations can help you with serving the client request. It depends on the criticality of the business. Okay, if you want to have the high availability of the web application, then you can go for the multiple redundant data centers. As a consequence, the costs for multiple redundant data centers are quite high. The only larger web companies can afford to create and manage their own. Most web companies will instead lease space from a third-party data center. So data centers, if the company is really large, they will have their own data centers. But most of the companies, what they will do is they will lease. Okay, whoever is having the data centers, they will lease from them, and they will have their servers hosted in that particular data center. And the now the data centers, instead of having a data center, we have the cloud solution. So you can request all the all your server request, everything can be given as a cloud solution. Commercial web hosting, it is also common for the reverse to be true. That is, a single server machine may host multiple sites. Okay, so we can have one site on multiple servers, or the other thing is, if the applications are very small, we can have multiple applications or the multiple sites on single server. Large commercial web hosting companies such as GoDaddy, Bluehost, DreamHost, and others will typically host hundreds or even thousands of sites on a single machine or a mirrored on several servers. So on single server, we can host multiple. If the applications are really small, we can host multiple application. And there are many web hosting companies. Other than this list, there are many other. So these are the some examples of the companies which do the web hosting. Is the internet a cloud? The internet is often visually represented as a cloud, which is perhaps an apt way to think about the internet, given the importance of light and magnetic pulse to its operation. Actually, no. It is important to recognize that our global network does not work using a magical water vapor, but it's implemented via millions of kilometers of copper wires, fiber optic cables, as well as via hundreds of thousands of server computers. So internet is not like a just like a cloud. Physically, there are wires, cables running thousands of kilometers. There are thousands of server computers that are connected, and probably equal number of routers, switches, and other network devices, along with many thousands of air conditioning equipments and is specially constructed server rooms like data centers and the buildings. So internet, it comprises of all these things. It is not just like a cloud. So this is the one example you can see. So from the computer to the local provider, our main experience of the hardware components of the internet is that which we experience in our homes. So in our homes, what we might be having is a broadband modem would be there. Suppose if you want to have a wireless internet connection inside your house, you might be having a wireless router. So and if you see here, this is the ISP, internet service provider head end. So he has cable modem termination CMTS. All the connections are running from here. Fiber junction boxes. From there, connections are taken. So that is how this is inside your house. In the house, you will have broadband modem, also called cable modem or DSL modem, is a bridge between the network hardware outside the house, typically controlled by the phone or the cable company ISP, and the network hardware inside the house. So this will give a bridge between the outside the house network and the inside the house network. That is done by the broadband modem. The device is often supplied by the ISP. Okay, so you can have your own device or it will be supplied by the your internet service providers. Routers, wireless router is perhaps the most visible manifestation of the internet in one's home, in that it is a device we typically need to purchase and install. So if you want to have a wireless inside your house, so you'll be buying the wireless router. Sometimes it is also provided by the service provider. uh, Routers are in fact one of the most important and ubiquitous hardware devices that makes the internet work. At its simplest, a router is a hardware device that forwards data packets from one network to another network. So we already saw the router, the job of the router, how it transfers the packets in the network. This is the examples of the routers and the routing tables. So you can see here there is a sender address is there. This is the sender address, sender IP address 149.46, and we have destination address. Destination address is 209.202.161.240, which is this is the destination address, and this is the packet number 1. Okay, this is the information that is sent to the this particular router, and we have the routing table. From the routing table you can see this particular packet, okay, is to be sent to this, okay, to this is the address that it has to be sent, and next hop, this will give the next hop. Next hop is this particular IP 65.47.242.9. So that is this, that information will be sent to this particular IP. Again, this IP routing table, in this routing table for this destination, we have the next hop here, which is dot 130, which is this, okay, the next router. And in this routing table for this destination, this is the next hop, that is the next IP address. The information is sent to this dot 182 information is sent here, and now the next hop is from here, the information is sent to the center. Out of the house, once we leave the confines of our own home, the hardware of the internet becomes much murkier. In the illustration, the various neighborhood broadband cables, typically using copper, aluminum, and other metals, are aggregated and connected to fiber optic cable via the fiber connection. So it is just the outside of our houses. Fiber optic cable is a glass-based wire that transmits the light and has significantly greater bandwidth and speed in comparison to the metal wires. These are the different options for the cable. For the provider, uh, these fiber optic cables eventually make their way to the ISPs, okay, head end, which is a facility that may contain cable modem termination system, CMTS. So CMTS, or a digital subscriber line access multiplexer in a DSL based system. So all this is just for your information. Don't worry. This is before we start with your actual syllabus. That is HTML. Just to give the background about the how the web application, how all these network layers are there, how the what are the different protocols. Okay. So this is just they're showing how the connection will be, how the network will go. Internet exchange points, national and regional network using internet exchange points. Okay, okay. This is a internet exchange point. IXPs, real IXPs and data centers across the ocean. Okay, under the fiber optic lines. So you can see this is a how the cables are running from continent to continent. You can see all the continents. Okay. In the next class, we'll see the what is a domain name system, DNS.